Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. Today is April 2nd. I have already covered the criminal abortion death anniversary for today, and I will link to that below. But what we're going to look at is a really sad anniversary, April 2nd of 2005, and it's the brutal reality of baby Rowan's death. Now, Rowan's mother uses the name Angele when dealing with this situation, and it was an extremely stressful situation. I spoke to her about it, but I'm not at liberty to discuss it. But she was really having a lot of pressure put on her. She sought Christian counseling, but ended up, very sadly, with a counselor who informed her that the best way to deal with the situation would be to seek an abortion. And with a heavy heart, she finally agreed to do so. Now, there were abortion clinics near where she lived, but those facilities use the D&D dismemberment technique that uses forceps to pull the baby apart while he's still alive. And though the counselor had convinced Angele that it was necessary for her baby to die before birth, she couldn't bear to think of him being torn limb from limb. She found out about Epoch Clinic of Orlando Women's Center, where they use a method similar to how animals are put down, only not quite as merciful, which is an overdose of cardiac drugs injected directly into the baby's heart. So there's only the one jab instead of being grabbed with these tooth forceps and pulled into little pieces. And then after the baby dies, the woman goes into labor and she expels the dead baby. This struck Angele as much less brutal for her baby than the dismemberment abortion. So she traveled from her home state to Florida, which was quite a distance. Now, Angele even asked the counselor, if you can call it that, at the clinic about the injection. She wanted to make sure that this was a quick injection that would stop the baby's heart right away and not the saline that she had heard about that poisons the baby slowly and scalds his skin and gets in his eyes and nose. And they assured her that, yes, it's a very quick, painless death for the fetus. But for some reason, although staff put the laminaria in Angele's cervix to dilate it for the labor, they didn't inject the digoxin into Rowan's heart. Angele was still concerned that she felt the baby moving after she left the facility on day one, but she told herself she just must have misunderstood how this worked. So she took the labor-inducing drugs as instructed, and early the next morning, she was already in labor. She arrived at the facility at 9 a.m. before it opened and just pounded on the door to be let in. About 15 minutes later, somebody let her in. And I'll frequently be using Angele's own words. I was directed to the room. I had been there for a moment the day before and thought it to be a waiting room for family or driving companions. It had a leather sofa and a fabric sofa, both with a white blanket stretched across the seat cushions, a small television, and a few magazines. But Angele found out it wasn't a waiting area, it was the delivery room. It was cold. They gave her a wet blanket and a heating pad and told her the doctor wouldn't be there until 2 p.m. She was there at 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. She's supposed to wait 5 hours when she's in active labor. Her contractions became stronger and more frequent. She was in a lot of pain, but the staff member told Angele that if they gave her medication for the pain, it would just slow her labor. Violin, the clinic staffer, left the room and Angele started bleeding. Again, her words. I came back to the sofa. They both really smelled awful. Wrapped up in the wet and sour-smelling blanket, then decided I was better without it. I rocked back and forth on my hands and knees, trying to hold the heating pad to my stomach, both to relieve the pain and to try to stay warm. I looked down and saw little smears and spots of dried blood on the floor and an old cotton ball with blood on it by the fabric-covered sofa across from me. Noticing how dirty it was and how no one was in the room or even nearby in the hallway began to make me nervous and uncomfortable. I went right back to the powder room and began to try to push a lot. I thought it might help since I was told I was nowhere near ready to deliver. In one agonizing push, I felt and heard something come out. Then immediately another push. I was weak. I just held my head in my hands for a moment. Then I decided to stand up and I looked. There was my baby, the whitish cord and what I thought surely must be the placenta. I started sobbing and lay down on the floor. I stared and stared at my son. I was horrified that I just had him in a commode. His right leg moved. He curled up a bit like he was cold. I screamed for Violene. No one came. I managed to get to the doorway, pants down, blood everywhere, and yelled again. I went back to my baby. I heard her say she'd be right there. I showed her Rowan and told her he was alive and moving and to call 911. She took a quick look and said, "He's not moving now," and she'd be back to take care of things while walking out. I called her again. I was touching Rowan softly and he moved again. I called her back. Rowan jumped, I think startled by the loud sound of my calling for help. I showed her that he was moving and alive. I begged her to hurry and call 911 now. She said for me to lie down and she would go get her supervisor. No one came. I continued to try to caress and comfort my son by rubbing his back, tummy, and chest. I stroked his precious little head and kept telling him I loved him and we would be okay. I was afraid to move him because I did not want to do anything that might end up hurting him. I pushed my pinky into his little hand and his fingers curled around me. Still no one was coming. I was terrified, but trying not to let him know I was scared. I kept telling him what a beautiful son he was and that we were going to be safe soon. Staff told Angele not to call 911, so she decided to call her friend. I left Rowan for 2 seconds, grabbed the phone, jumped back into the bathroom to be with him, calling my girlfriend Sharon at the same time. I told her Rowan was alive and no one was helping and to please call an ambulance to the clinic, and immediately hung up. And Angele's friend did call 911, and if you are watching this on Rumble, I provide the link to the companion post below, and it has a transcript of Angele's friend's 911 call. I stayed beside Rowan, talking to him, telling him how strong he was being and how proud I was of him. I told him God must really want us to be together for him to make it through everything he had just been through, and that Mommy was so sorry, but happy to have a chance to love him. I told him he was a strong little miracle and that I couldn't wait for him to meet his brother and sister. I just kept touching him, trying to warm him with my hands and talking to him so he would not feel any more afraid than he already must. Then Rowan stopped moving. Angele described her son. He was perfect, slightly pale and a little translucent. His eyebrows were pale but wide and well defined. You could see little hairs on his face and head. He had the tiniest little fingernails and toenails. I noticed they already had a little bit of growth. His mouth was lovely. He was this perfectly formed 1 pound, 1 ounce human being. He was beautiful. He had been so strong. I wrapped him in a blue pad instead of one of the wet blankets. I just kept kissing him and telling him I loved him so much. I told him I was sorry I couldn't get anyone to help us, and I was so sorry for ever coming here. And again, if you're watching this on Rumble, you can follow the link, and there's Rowan's autopsy report and a picture. A staff member came to the bathroom and demanded that Angele give her the baby, but Angele refused. Now, although Angele's friend had asked for rescue for the baby, Angele did not see any ambulance staff at the clinic, only police. Angele told the police she didn't want to give the baby to clinic staff, that she wanted to take him to the funeral home for the funeral she had planned prior to the abortion. Even though staff had originally told Angele that she would have to stay until after she'd been examined by the doctor, once Rowan had died, they told her to leave, and she was discharged without ever being examined. I've told you, they'd lose interest in the mother once the baby's dead. Now, some issues I want to raise about this incident. First of all, the pre-abortion counseling was obviously woefully inadequate. If a woman changes her mind in an instant like that, it's hard to argue that she really needed the abortion or that she'd been prepared for the full ramifications of what she was signing up for. And knowing what I know about Angele's situation, she should have been given a lot of help and protection. And instead, people were protecting the wrong people. Now, supposedly, abortion clinics exist to support women's choices, but where was their respect for Angele's choice to call an ambulance for her son? Now, a lot of pro-lifers cast stones at Angele, not understanding at all how she could have made the decision to have an abortion, wanting the procedure to be quick and painless for a baby that she had named and planned a funeral for. But what they don't understand is people that are in a crisis make terrible decisions. This is part of why bereaved people are usually told to wait a year to make any major life decisions. And secondly, you can't live in an atmosphere of poison without being poisoned by it. Angele has lived in our society where we're told if a mother has a bad situation, that it's the responsible and caring and loving thing for her to abort her baby. And she recognized that her decision making abilities were impaired, so she consulted with people she trusted, the Christian counselor, the counselors at the clinic. She was adrift on a sea of uncertainty and despair and confusion, and she latched onto the wrong plank. And she's painfully aware of it now that it's too late to save her baby. But pro-lifers, would you rather she had hardened her heart and argued that, that what she had done was the right thing and that the counselors had steered her to the best thing for her baby and that it was a good thing that her baby died in an abortion clinic toilet? I don't think so. I think we need to support women who realize too late that they were led down the wrong path. So, again, if you're watching this on Rumble, you can follow the link below to the original, to the companion post and sources. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to my blog, realchoice.blogspot.com, and you can find Rowan's story there.